we have shown that well-being is an emergent property of a whole range of happenings in a person's life. Similarly, the same set of properties, the same set of actions that occur that produce well-being also produce the capacity to learn, lead to increased risk of mental illness in children of school age, and consequently to suicide, as you mentioned, Paula. And the sets of processes are the same. Inability, poor performance in educational terms caused by the same set of abnormalities, same set of difficulties that occur in a child's life that lead to increased risk of ill health. And therefore, I would argue that if you're going to give children the best opportunity to achieve their potential, both in terms of well-being and in education, nurturing, consistent, safe childhood, where mothers are safe, above all else, away from violence, away from the stresses of violence, where nutrition is important, and critically, where mothers learn to bond, to attach, baby and mother learn to attach very early on. They're given that opportunity. That failure of any of those processes leads to demonstrable change in brain development. The science is very clear on this. So well-being and good educational attainment both have similar origins.
In my field, health and nutrition, increasingly evidence shows us that you have to intervene early. You have to reach mothers even before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and the first 2 years of life or first 2 years of life. It's called the window of opportunity for interventions. This is when you see most of the deficiencies happening. If the deficiencies happen during this age groups, during this period, it will be irreversible later on. And on the positive side, if you do intervene, you will see better success and lasting success. Fortunately, concordance here. There is the same window of opportunity in both fields for health and nutrition, and then for education and early childhood development.
I think the great lesson that I've learned, I work with probably about 200 schools, but the great lesson I've learned is there's many, many teachers and leaders who want to do a great job on wellbeing in schools. But a lot of it is tokenism because they're so busy and they're so time poor and they're burning out. And I think that they do small things, but there's no strategic approach in the way that we've been doing at Knox, where we really plan it well. It's taken across the school. I develop teachers in the skills of wellbeing first. I don't start with the students because the teachers have high levels of mental illness actually at the moment, as do the students. I mean, World Health Organization, bear with me, I'll give you a statistic. Depression is the #1 cause of illness and disability in children 10 to 14 now. And suicide ranks #3 as a cause of death, and 50% of people who develop mental disorders have their first symptoms by the age of 14. I mean, that's a shocking statistic, but the way I see it is we're not working enough on prevention. But treatment and prevention are two very different things.
Without the systemic approach, it's really difficult to do much if we remain working in silos with no coordination, because it is the same child who lives at home, who's watches TV, who goes to school. So we need to work in concert. Now, regarding whether well-being and education, how they interact, I just would like to say the obvious in a way that a child, we just have to actually change perspective. A child in school is a whole person, is one person. Body, mind, heart, and soul at the same moment. He's there all. If you slice him and you just look at his cognitive aspect and completely ignore the rest, it doesn't work. I mean, a priori, you lost, huh? And that's why it is not really the end of the world, not that complicated. We just have to realize the obvious. Huh? So, for example, we now know that the quality of human relationships in the school are a fundamental enabler for learning and for well-being.
Empathy is something that's learned within minutes of birth as babies start to attach and mothers and babies start to attach. And that empathy, you can see it, I can see it. I go to prisons quite a lot, and usually they let me out. But talking to young people who end up in prison, they clearly have had no stable attachment to an older adult who would act as a mentor and so on. So empathy, I would say, is a really critical thing. Without empathy, you really are going to struggle in life.
We don't talk about mental health and psychology and positivity. I mean, that can often turn people off. So we get a language that people understand, they feel competent to talk about. And parents are an absolute crucial thing, but I also think language is standing in our way. I mean, you say wellness, we're talking well-being, other people talk flourishing. We have to get some consistent language that people can engage with. For me, it's fitness, because I say fitness is a process, it's dynamic, and you have to practice it and you have to do it regularly. And I think well-being initiatives, that's what we have to look at, practicing them so we do it naturally.
It is how you grow a child. It is upbringing. So if we don't see that as part of the enterprise, and we don't care about obesity, smoking, 8 hours on TV, dormant lifestyle, traumas and conflict and all that, then fine, things happen. So I believe humanity is paying for that dearly, and oftentimes it is thought that the health care system should pay for it. Wrong. It is fundamental and a matter of education and learning. So to my mind, again, before we go talk about metrics, what is the nature of the business? What are we doing?
If you sit down and say, okay, we want to improve education in Scotland by X%, by however you measure it, in 5 years' time, in 5 years, nothing will have changed, because A, you won't have collected the data, B, you won't have done the right thing. There's a whole load of reasons why projects fail. So what we have said, for example, in terms of early life, we set out last year to reduce infant mortality in Scotland by 15% by the end of 2015. And I think we're going to achieve that. But you have to have the method for change, and you have to have the aim that says how much you're going to make the change, by when. Otherwise, you're just playing at it.
Maybe even more important is to find out ways for having some indicators and assessments of what's going on in a real-time manner, and understand the processes better. So there is this movement in health and nutrition to we call it implementation science or process evaluation, that is increasingly trying to get at what you're talking about, and it's a really, really important element of success.
What can we do to try and improve the opportunity of school health? Schools are, as we know, often one of the key resources at the community level for so many things. How can we tap into that resource that's so critically important, both in terms of learners, but also the wider community?
The role of schools in advocating and advancing health, I think it's really crucial. And the point is that when you talk about integration, it has different levels across the spectrum. It could start from just simple co-location. For example, just taking advantage of the fact that children come to school to provide immunization, or to run a campaign for supplementation. For example, deworming has been very successful, taking advantage of schools. And unfortunately, I think the health sector has not tried to take this farther and try to really define some more integrated initiatives that not only just take advantage of the co-location, but also define joint process and joint outcome indicators that both sectors would be responsible for.
What governments are quite good at as they're facing austerity then is to play the budgets off against each other. And actually health and education find themselves in competition for supposedly scarce resources. What I'm looking for then is ideas or maybe examples where advocates for equality in health and advocates for equality in education come together and don't play that game, break out of that zero-sum game and come together and say, we are at the core of a thriving society and we need to work together, and here's why you can't play that game with us.
Again, I don't believe that populations respond well to being told, to being micromanaged by politicians. Well, ours certainly doesn't. As some of you will know, recently we've just had all sorts of voting interests in Scotland, and it's not over yet, let me tell you. And what we have tried to do is to get people at the front line to design the change. This is the method I'm talking about. We've asked people to say, okay, write down all the things that you do that can contribute to well-being in children and better educational attainment. We have a program called Raising Attainment for All, and we got 800 people together from across Scotland in a room. We sat down, we wrote down maybe 100 things that people thought of could do it. How could we turn that into small tests of change? Ministers couldn't design this. Experts couldn't design this. The people design it.
In Palestine, for the past 6 years, we have launched a national program called Ilham Palestine, Inspire Palestine. And the tagline is Learning for Well-being. It is about grassroots initiatives across the country, Gaza and the West Bank, by teachers, principals, counselors, and whole schools to enhance the school environment towards learning for well-being, making the school more conducive to learning for well-being. Every year we have about 1,000 initiatives, grassroots in villages and camps, wherever, and we select the inspiring ones. We make films about them. We have a Harvest annual book about best practices, and Basra in his capacity in the ministry as a partner, health is a partner, social welfare is a partner, and education. We have tried this multi-stakeholder partnership. The ministry has been, done an incredible job by mainstreaming those. So this is an incredible example where you start grassroots and then you go systemic.
Science is really important. The way you change a complex system is to make the status quo unsustainable. And we made the point that we could not go on wasting lives the way we were doing, and that there were methods for change.